high in the jagged peaks of the frost-spine mountains, where the sky bled violet at dawn and the snow never melted, only deepened into ancient layers of ice, there stood a solitary cabin, half buried in drifts and forgotten by time. It belonged to a man named Rennick, a grizzled loner who had fled the crowded cities of Earth decades ago, seeking silence and solitude among the frozen crags. He lived off solar panels buried under snow, canned rations, and the occasional rabbit snared in steel traps. His beard was long and streaked with gray, his hands calloused from chopping wood and fixing broken pipes. The locals in the distant valley spoke of him in whispers. Some said he was an ex-soldier. Others claimed he'd killed a man in a bar fight and vanished into the wilds. But no one truly knew Rennick, and he preferred it that way. The alien woman came on a night when the wind screamed through the mountain passes like a chorus of lost souls. She moved like a shadow against the snow, her bare feet leaving faint imprints in the powder, her long white hair whipping behind her like smoke. Her skin was a deep, royal purple, shimmering faintly under the twin moons that hung low and swollen in the sky. She wore tattered robes of a silken material that seemed to absorb light, and her eyes, large, luminous, and silver, glowed with a quiet desperation. She was tall and slender, almost fragile-looking, but there was a strength in her posture, a dignity that didn't belong to a thief. Her name was Vera, though Rennick wouldn't learn that until much later. To him, in that moment, she was just another intruder, another threat in a world already full of them. She had come from a dying ship, a refugee vessel that crash-landed weeks earlier in a ravine 2 valleys over. The others, her people, were gone, either dead from the impact or taken by the freezing cold or the predators that prowled the high snowfields. Vera survived by sheer will and a biology that allowed her to endure temperatures that would kill a human in minutes. But even her kind needed food, and the ship's stores had long since been scavenged. For days she wandered, following the faint warmth of distant lights, until she saw the flicker of fire through the trees. Rennick's cabin, a tiny beacon in the endless white. She didn't want to steal. She had been raised in the city of Lumine, where honor was measured by how much you gave, not how much you took. But hunger had a way of bending even the strongest principles. When she crept through the back window, its latch rusted and loose. She wasn't thinking of morality. She was thinking of the ache in her stomach, the way her vision blurred when she stood too quickly, the memory of her younger sister's voice whispering, "Don't let us die, Vera." Inside, the cabin was warm, smelling of pine and old coffee. A pot sat on the stove half filled with stew. A loaf of bread rested on the counter, wrapped in cloth. She reached for it, her fingers trembling, her breath shallow. She didn't hear Rennick enter. He had been checking his traps, returning early because the wind had picked up. When he pushed open the door, snow swirling behind him, he saw her immediately. This strange, purple-skinned woman with white hair like frost, clutching his bread like a starving animal. His rifle was in his hands before his brain could catch up. "Don't move!" he barked, voice rough from disuse. Vera froze, her silver eyes wide, the bread slipping from her fingers and landing with a soft thud on the wooden floor. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Rennick stared at her, heart pounding. He'd seen strange things in the mountains. Bears with 3 eyes, birds that sang in human voices, but never anything like this. She wasn't human. That was obvious. Her ears were slightly pointed, her fingers too long, her skin too perfect, too smooth, and yet she looked afraid, truly afraid, not like a predator caught in the act, but like a child who'd been caught stealing candy. "You're not from around here," Rennick said, lowering the rifle slightly but not enough to be careless. Vera didn't answer. She couldn't. Her people's language was melodic, built on soft hums and vibrations, and she had no idea how to speak English. She raised her hands slowly, showing she meant no harm, then pointed to her stomach and mimed eating. Rennick frowned. "Hungry, huh?" He stepped closer, keeping the rifle ready. "You broke into my home. That's a crime. Even if you're from another damn planet." He could have shot her. He'd done worse in his past. But something in her eyes stopped him. Not beauty, though she was undeniably striking, but sorrow. A depth of sadness that made his chest ache. He remembered the look of a dog he'd once found trapped in a hunter's snare. Ribs showing, eyes full of pain and hope all at once. He'd freed it, fed it, kept it for a month before it ran off. He wasn't a cruel man, not really, just a tired one. Instead of shooting, he tossed her a can of beans from the shelf. "Catch." She fumbled it at first, then clutched it to her chest like treasure. He pointed to the stove. "You can heat it." But if you try anything funny, I won't miss next time. She nodded, though he wasn't sure she understood. Then, with surprising grace, she opened the can, poured the beans into a pot, and set it on the burner. She moved with a quiet elegance, like water flowing over stone. Rennick sat at the table watching her. "Where'd you come from?" he asked, though he knew she wouldn't answer. "Sky? Another world? Another dimension?" He chuckled dryly. "Hell, maybe you're just a really weird hermit like me." She glanced at him, then smiled, just slightly, a small curve of her lips. It lit up her face like sunrise on snow. Rennick felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not attraction, not yet. More like recognition, like he'd been waiting for someone without knowing it. That night, he let her sleep on the couch, wrapped in an old army blanket. He took the bed, but didn't sleep much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her eyes, her hair, the way she ate the beans like they were a feast. In the morning, he woke to find her gone. The back window was open again, the bread still on the floor. But something else was missing. His spare thermal coat, the one he used for the coldest nights. He cursed under his breath. "Ungrateful little alien," he muttered, stomping into his boots. But as he stepped outside, he saw footprints leading into the woods. Not small, dainty steps, but uneven, dragging. And then, farther on, a smear of purple on the snow. Blood. Rennick's stomach dropped. He followed the trail, rifle slung over his shoulder, heart thudding. It led to a rocky outcrop where the wind howled between the stones. There, half buried in snow, was Vera, unconscious. Her white hair matted with ice, the stolen coat wrapped around a small, shivering bundle. Rennick rushed forward and pulled the bundle free. It wasn't food. It was a child. A tiny alien girl, no older than 5. Her skin a lighter shade of purple, her hair like spun moonlight. She was barely breathing. Vera had stolen the bread and the coat not for herself, but for this child. She had found her in the wreckage, orphaned, freezing, and had carried her for miles through the storm. Rennick's anger vanished like smoke. He scooped up the girl first, then dragged Vera over his shoulder with surprising strength for a man his age. Back at the cabin, he stripped them both of wet clothes, wrapped them in every blanket he had, and built the fire high. He heated milk, powdered from a tin, and dribbled it into the girl's mouth with a spoon. For hours, he sat between them, wiping Vera's brow, adjusting the blankets, whispering words he didn't expect her to understand. "You're gonna be okay, both of you. Just hold on." When Vera finally woke, it was near dawn. The girl, whom she later called Myra, was curled against her chest, sleeping soundly. Rennick was dozing in the chair, his hat tipped over his face. She watched him for a long time, her mind foggy but her heart full. This man, this rough, bearded human, had saved them. He could have left them to die. He could have shot her. Instead, he gave them warmth, food, safety. Tears welled in her silver eyes, silent and slow. When Rennick stirred, he saw her looking at him. "You're awake," he said, voice gruff but kind. "Good. The kid's doing fine. Fever broke an hour ago." Vera tried to speak, but only a soft hum came out. She touched her throat, then pointed to her mouth, shaking her head. Rennick understood. "Can't talk, huh? Well, we'll figure it out." He handed her a mug of hot tea. "Drink. You need it." Over the next few days, an unspoken bond formed between them. Rennick taught her simple words: food, water, fire, safe, using gestures and pictures from old magazines. She learned fast, her mind sharp despite her exhaustion. In return, she showed him things from her world. How to purify water with a small crystal that glowed blue, how to mend a torn jacket with thread that hardened like steel. She hummed songs that made the cabin vibrate gently, as if the walls themselves were listening. And then there was Myra. The little girl was shy at first, clinging to Vera's side, but she warmed to Rennick when he gave her a carved wooden bird he'd made years ago. She couldn't speak either, but she laughed. A high, chiming sound like wind through glass. Rennick found himself smiling more than he had in 20 years. He started cooking real meals, not just canned slop. He fixed the broken radio. He even cleaned the cabin. One evening, as snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled within, Rennick looked at Vera across the table. She was mending a sock, her fingers moving with delicate precision. Myra was asleep in the corner, wrapped in a patchwork quilt. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like they'd known each other forever. You know, Rennick said, sipping his coffee, I used to think I didn't need anyone, that the world was better when it was just me and the mountains. But now, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Now I think maybe I was wrong. Vera looked up, her silver eyes reflecting the firelight. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. The way she looked at him said everything. Then, in a moment that would be remembered for years in the Valley Tales, Rennick stood, walked around the table and knelt before her. He took her hands in his rough, scarred hands holding smooth, purple ones and said, You came here stealing bread. Could have thrown you out. Could have hurt you. But instead you stayed. You helped. You made this place feel like a home again. He took a deep breath. Vera, will you marry me? If you become my wife, you'll have my mercy, my protection, my love, forever. She gasped. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't understand every word, but she understood the meaning. She understood the gesture, the sincerity, the weight of it. Slowly, she nodded. Then, in a voice soft and melodic as a winter wind, she whispered, Yes. Rennick grinned, a real, wide, toothy grin that made him look 10 years younger. He pulled her into a hug, careful not to crush her, and for the first time in decades, he felt whole. But peace in the Frostspine Mountains was never meant to last. A week later, the sky split open with fire. It started as a flicker on the horizon, a streak of light falling from the heavens, growing brighter, faster. Then came the thunderous boom as it crashed into the northern ridge, shaking the cabin, sending snow sliding from the roof. Rennick ran outside, Vera and Myra behind him, their breath fogging in the cold. From the impact site, smoke curled into the sky, thick and black, and then, through the haze, figures emerged. They were tall, armored in sleek, silver suits that shimmered like liquid metal. Their helmets were smooth, faceless, their movements precise and mechanical. They carried weapons that hummed with energy, glowing at the tips like blue flames. They were not human, and they were not friendly. Vera went rigid. She made a sound, a low, mournful hum, then whispered a single word, Zarn. Rennick didn't need a translator to know they were trouble. Get inside, he ordered, pushing Vera and Myra toward the door. But it was too late. One of the figures raised a hand, and a beam of light shot out, striking the cabin's chimney. Stone exploded, raining debris. Rennick tackled the women to the ground as another blast scorched the snow where they'd been standing. The Zarn advanced, silent and relentless. Vera trembled. They are my people's hunters, she said in halting English. They destroy those who break laws. I stole from a supply cache to save Myra. They marked me. They never stop. Rennick's mind raced. He wasn't a hero. He was a man who fixed stoves and trapped rabbits. But now, with Vera and Myra depending on him, he felt something awaken inside him. A fierce, protective fire. He grabbed his rifle, checked the ammo, then pulled out an old flare gun from a drawer. We're not dying today, he growled. He led them through a hidden tunnel beneath the cabin, a storm shelter he'd built years ago. Inside, it was cramped but stocked with food, water, and a battery-powered radio. They'll search, Vera said. They have scanners. They'll find us. Then we don't stay, Rennick said. We fight. That night, under the cover of a blizzard, they moved. Rennick rigged tripwires with tin cans and flares. He set bear traps in the snow, covered with white cloth. He used Vera's crystal to create a heat shield around the shelter, masking their warmth from the Zarn sensors. And when the hunters came, creeping through the storm like ghosts, they walked right into his traps. The first Zarn stepped on a can. Clattered. He turned, just as a flare exploded behind him, blinding his sensors. Rennick fired from the rocks, hitting the joint in his armor. The hunter fell, his suit sparking. The second one fired blindly, but Rennick had already rolled away, dragging Vera and Myra behind a boulder. Now, he shouted. Vera pressed her hands to the snow, humming a deep, resonant tone. The crystal in her palm flared bright, and the ground trembled. Ice cracked. A hidden crevasse opened beneath the third Zarn, swallowing him whole. The fourth turned to flee, but Myra, small and brave, threw a rock with perfect aim, striking his helmet. He stumbled, and Rennick shot him in the leg. When the last hunter lay disabled, Rennick approached, rifle aimed at his head. Why are you here? He demanded. The Zarn's voice came through a speaker, cold and mechanical. The woman is a thief, a fugitive. She must be returned for judgment. She's not going anywhere, Rennick said. Not while I'm alive. The hunter paused. Then, surprisingly, it laughed, a harsh metallic sound. You are not her kind. Why protect her? Because she's my wife, Rennick said, standing tall. And in my world, we protect our own. The Zarn was silent. Then, slowly, it raised its hands. We will return. The council must decide. But know this, your defiance has been noted. With that, the surviving hunters activated a device, vanishing in a flash of light. Silence returned to the mountain. The storm calmed. The stars blinked above. Back in the cabin, half destroyed but still standing, Rennick lit the stove. Vera held Myra close, her eyes full of fear and hope. They'll come back, she whispered. Rennick nodded, stirring a pot of stew. Probably, but we'll be ready. He looked at her, then smiled. And until then we have bread. And each other. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. The snow continued to fall. And in that small, broken cabin, love had taken root in the most unexpected of places. Stronger than fear, deeper than silence, warmer than any fire. Weeks passed in quiet rhythm. The kind of peace that feels stolen when you know it won't last. The cabin, though scarred by the Zarn's attack, stood firm. Patched with wood, sealed with tar, and warmed by a stubborn stove that Rennick had rebuilt from scrap. Snowdrifts piled high around the windows, turning the world into a soft, white cocoon. Inside, life bloomed in ways neither Rennick nor Vera could have imagined. They were married not with rings or priests, but under the twin moons, in a clearing dusted with frost. Rennick wore his best coat, the one with the brass buttons he'd polished for hours. Vera wrapped herself in a robe woven from silver thread that shimmered like starlight, a gift from her people's ship before it burned. Myra stood between them, clutching a bouquet of frozen mountain flowers, her tiny face glowing with joy. Rennick spoke from the heart. Simple words, honest and raw, about love found in silence, about mercy turning into something greater. Vera answered in her melodic tongue, her voice rising like a hymn. And when she said yes again, this time with full understanding, Rennick felt something inside him crack open, like ice giving way to spring. They began calling each other Kethra, a word from Vera's language that meant soul twin, the one your spirit recognizes across lifetimes. It wasn't just romance. It was deeper. When Rennick woke with nightmares of his past, of war, of blood, of the man he once was, Vera would press her forehead to his and hum a low, soothing tone that calmed his mind like medicine. When Vera trembled at the sound of distant thunder, mistaking it for Zarn dropships, Rennick would take her hand and walk her through the snow, pointing out animal tracks, telling silly stories about talking rabbits and grumpy bears, making her laugh in that chiming way that lit up the whole cabin. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done testing them. One morning, as Rennick chopped wood outside, Myra ran to the door, her small hands waving frantically. Kethra! Kethra! She cried, using the new word with pride. Vera rushed out to find the girl holding a small, pulsing device, glowing faint blue, half buried in the snow. It was a beacon, her people's beacon. Vera's face went pale. It's from Lumine, she whispered. They're not coming to punish me. They're calling me home. Rennick dropped the axe. Home? What do you mean? She explained through tears. The Zarn weren't the only ones searching. A rescue fleet, peaceful, sent by the Council of Lumine, had been tracking survivors of the crash. The beacon was a signal, we are here. Come to the Valley of Echoes. We will take you home. Rennick's heart sank. So, you're leaving? Vera looked at him, then at Myra, then back at the beacon. I don't know, she said softly. My people, they are my blood. But you are my heart. That night, they sat by the fire, the beacon resting on the table like a ticking bomb. Myra fell asleep on Rennick's lap, her breath slow and even. He stroked her hair, then looked at Vera. You should go, he said, voice quiet but firm. You have a world, a culture, a life I can't give you. And what about you? She asked. What about us? I'll be fine, he said with a shrug. I've been alone before. But his eyes betrayed him. They were full of pain. Vera reached across the table, took his hand. You think I don't see it? You smile more now. You laugh. You cook with spices. You even sing badly. She smiled. You've come alive since I came. And so have I. But this isn't just about me. It's about Myra. She has a chance to grow up with her people, to learn our ways, to speak our language. To not be afraid of the sky. Rennick swallowed hard. He hadn't thought of that. Myra deserved more than a frozen cabin and a human who didn't understand her world. So, with heavy hearts, they made a plan. They would go to the Valley of Echoes. They would meet the rescue fleet. And they would decide together what came next. The journey was brutal. The Valley of Echoes lay deep in the northern glaciers, a place where sound bounced for miles and the wind carved tunnels through ice. They traveled on foot, pulling a sled with supplies, Myra wrapped in furs, Vera leading with the beacon pulsing in her hand. Rennick brought his rifle, his knife, and every trick he'd learned surviving the mountains. They crossed frozen rivers, climbed sheer cliffs, and once, barely escaped a pack of ice wolves. Creatures with 6 legs and eyes like molten gold. On the third night, as they huddled in a cave, Rennick asked Vera, "What if your people don't accept me? What if they see me as a savage, a kidnapper?" Vera turned to him, firelight dancing on her purple skin. "Then I will tell them," she said, "that you are the man who gave me bread when I stole it, who carried me through the snow, who taught my daughter to laugh, who fought gods for us. And if they cannot see your worth, then I choose you. Always." Rennick didn't cry, but something warm and heavy settled in his chest. When they reached the Valley of Echoes, the sky was clear, the stars sharp as glass. In the center of the frozen plain stood a massive ship, sleek, silver, shaped like a crescent moon, humming with quiet power. Around it, figures in flowing white robes moved with grace, their skin various shades of blue and violet, their white hair glowing faintly in the dark. They were Vera's people. A woman stepped forward, tall, regal, with eyes like polished silver. "Vera of Lumine," she said in perfect, melodic English. "You have survived. We are grateful." Vera bowed. "Counselor Silra, I return with my family." The counselor's gaze fell on Myra, then on Rennick. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "This human, he is with you?" "He is my Kethra," Vera said firmly, "and Myra's protector. Without him, we would be dead." The counselor studied Rennick for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled. "Then he is welcome. The people of Lumine do not turn away those who show mercy." Relief flooded through Rennick, but it didn't last. A new voice cut through the air, cold, mechanical, familiar. "You are mistaken, counselor." From the shadows emerged 3 Zarn warriors, their armor pristine, their weapons armed. Behind them stood a 4th figure, taller, cloaked in black, his face hidden. The woman Vera broke sacred law. She stole from the Unity Cache. She must face judgment. And the human, he attacked enforcers of order. He is a criminal. Rennick stepped in front of Vera and Myra. "You want her? You go through me." The lead Zarn raised his weapon. "Then you will die." But before he could fire, the ground shook. Not from an explosion. Not from a weapon. From music. Vera began to sing. It started as a low hum, then rose into a melody so pure, so powerful, that the air itself seemed to vibrate. The beacon in her hand flared, and suddenly, the ice beneath their feet cracked open. Not violently, but like a flower blooming. From below, glowing roots spread outward, pulsing with light. The Zarn stumbled back, their sensors overloading. The counselor gasped. "The Song of Awakening. But that's lost." "It was never lost," Vera said, her voice echoing with power. "It was buried. Like me." The song grew louder. The ice glowed. And then ships. Not one, but dozens. Ancient vessels, half buried in the glacier, rising from the depths, their lights flickering to life. They were Lumine ships, older, grander, long thought destroyed in the war with the Zarn. The Zarn commander stepped back. "Impossible. Those ships were wiped out centuries ago." "No," Vera said, still singing. "They were hidden. By my ancestors. Waiting for the one who could awaken them." The fleet rose into the sky, forming a protective ring around the valley. The Zarn, outnumbered and outmatched, activated their escape devices, but the energy field from the ships disrupted them. They were trapped. The counselor turned to Vera. "You are not just a survivor. You are the heir of the first song. The lost princess of Lumine." Vera stopped singing. She looked at Rennick, stunned. I didn't know." Rennick just grinned. "Princess, huh? Guess I married up." But the moment was shattered by a roar from the sky. A massive warship, black as void, shaped like a jagged claw, descended from the clouds. It bore the mark of the Zarn High Command, and from its belly, a voice boomed across the valley. Vera of Lumine, you will surrender, or we will reduce this planet to ash. The counselor turned pale. That's the Doomspire. It carries enough firepower to melt a continent. Rennick looked at the sky, then at Vera, then at Myra, who clung to his leg. So, he said, we fight, and fight they did. Using the ancient ships, Vera led the fleet in a daring assault, her song sinking their weapons, their movements, their very hearts. Rennick, though grounded, wasn't idle. He rigged explosives from the cabin's old mining supplies, planted them on the Doomspire's weak points during a daring infiltration with a team of Lumine warriors. Myra, brave beyond her years, used her innate connection to energy fields to disrupt the Zarn's shields, humming the same song her mother had taught her. The battle raged through the night. Lasers cut through the sky. Ships exploded in silent bursts of light. The mountains trembled. And in the final moment, as the Doomspire prepared to fire its planet-killing beam, Vera flew her ship, small, fast, glowing with song energy, straight into its core. The explosion lit up the entire planet. When dawn came, the sky was clear. The Doomspire was gone. The Zarn fleet scattered. The Lumine ships hovered, damaged but victorious. And from the wreckage, a rescue pod emerged. Vera, alive, pulled from the debris by Rennick himself. She was weak, burned, her hair singed, but alive. You idiot, Rennick whispered, holding her tight. You could have died. She smiled weakly. But I didn't, because you taught me how to come home. Peace came slowly. The Council of Lumine offered Vera a place among them, a leadership role, a chance to rebuild her people's future. But she made one condition: that Rennick and Myra be recognized as full citizens of Lumine, with all rights and honors. And so, on a hill overlooking the reborn city of Lumine, now rising from beneath the ice like a dream, Rennick stood beside Vera as she was crowned the new voice of unity. Myra, in a tiny silver robe, placed a crown of frozen flowers on her mother's head. That night, under a sky full of stars, Rennick and Vera danced in the snow, wrapped in each other's arms. The music was soft, carried on the wind. Myra slept nearby, safe, loved, whole. Rennick looked up at the stars and whispered, "Who'd have thought? A lonely man in the mountains ends up with a princess, a daughter, and a whole damn planet." Vera laughed, her voice like bells. "You didn't win me with weapons, Rennick. You won me with bread." And as the northern lights danced above them, painting the snow in colors no human had ever seen, they knew this was only the beginning. Years melted away like spring ice, and the frost-spine mountains, once a place of solitude and silence, became a sanctuary of warmth, laughter, and love. The cabin, rebuilt stronger than before, with walls of reinforced stone and a roof that shimmered faintly from Vera's energy-infused crystals, stood not as a lonely outpost, but as the heart of a new kind of family. A family born not just of blood, but of courage, sacrifice, and the quiet miracle of finding each other in a vast, uncaring universe. Rennick no longer called himself a hermit. He was Kethra, the earthman who stood against the stars for love. He still wore his old boots and patched coats, still grumbled about the cold, and still made the worst jokes known to man and alien alike. But now, when he chopped wood, Myra would run out in her little boots, shouting, "Papa, I help!" And he'd let her swing a tiny axe under his watchful eye. When he cooked stew, Vera would hum beside him, her silver eyes sparkling as she added strange alien spices that made the food glow faintly and taste incredible. They lived between two worlds now. Part of the time, they stayed in the mountains, where Rennick taught Myra how to track animals, build snow shelters, and listen to the voice of the wind. The rest of the year, they traveled to the reborn city of Lumine, now rising like a dream from beneath the glaciers. Its towers made of living crystal, its streets lit by floating orbs of soft light. There, Vera served as voice of unity, guiding her people into an era of peace, teaching them that strength wasn't in conquest, but in compassion. And always, by her side, was Rennick, no longer an outsider, but honored as Kethra of two worlds, the human who proved that love had no borders. The Zarn never returned. The destruction of the Doomspire had shattered their empire, and without their tyrannical command, the surviving Zarn fractured into smaller factions, some seeking peace, others fading into obscurity. The Council of Lumine offered amnesty to those who renounced violence, and slowly, the galaxy began to heal. Vera's song, the Song of Awakening, was taught to every child, not as a weapon, but as a hymn of hope. Myra grew into a bright, fearless girl, her purple skin glowing faintly in the dark, her white hair always a wild mess from climbing trees or rolling in the snow. She spoke both English and the melodic tongue of Lumine, and she had her mother's grace and her father's stubborn courage. She loved Earth stories, especially the ones about brave knights and talking animals, and Rennick would sit by the fire every night, making up tales of Sir Myra the Fearless, who rode ice wolves and battled shadow beasts with a spoon. One evening, as the twin moons rose and painted the snow in silver, the three of them sat outside, wrapped in thick furs, sipping warm spiced drink that shimmered in the cup. Fireflies, tiny bioluminescent insects Vera had brought from Lumine, danced in the air like floating stars. Myra looked up at the sky. "Papa, are we happy?" Rennick smiled, pulling her close. "Yeah, little one, we are." Vera rested her head on his shoulder. "We are more than happy. We are whole." And they were. No grand battles threatened their peace. No enemies hunted them in the night. The storm still came, the wind still howled, but inside the cabin, there was always light, always laughter, always love. They celebrated birthdays with cake and singing, sometimes in 2 languages, sometimes with made-up songs that made them all laugh until they cried. They planted a garden in the summer months, where earth vegetables grew beside glowing alien fruits that tasted like honey and rain. Rennick even learned to hum Vera's songs, badly but with heart, and she would giggle and correct him, pulling him into a slow dance under the stars. One day, as autumn painted the mountain trees in gold and crimson, Rennick carved 2 new names into the wooden beam above the cabin door, Vera and Myra, right beside his own. He hadn't done it sooner, he said, because he was waiting for the moment he truly believed they'd stay. And now, after all they'd survived, all they'd built, he knew, they weren't just staying. They were home. And so, as the years rolled on, the legend grew in both worlds. The tale of the lonely man in the snow, the purple-skinned woman who stole bread, and the child who bridged 2 species. Some said it was myth. Others swore they'd seen the glowing cabin, heard the laughter echoing through the peaks. But those who knew the truth, those who had lived it, needed no legend. They had each other. And in the quiet moments, when the fire crackled and the wind sang through the pines, Rennick would take Vera's hand, look into her silver eyes, and whisper the words that had started it all. "You stole my bread, and I gave you my mercy." And she would smile, lean in, and answer, "And I gave you my forever." Outside, the stars watched. The mountains stood guard. And within those walls, in the warmth of a love that had defied war, distance, and time, a family lived, peaceful, joyful, and free.